What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so this is something that apparently Dr. Umar Johnson said earlier this year. Well, actually, earlier last year. Uh, but for some reason, it's being I don't know, where you want to look for, circulated, I guess, recirculated for some reason. I guess people just need something to talk about. So there's this video of Dr. Umar Johnson, um, who, of course, is known more for uh, his belief and his views when it comes to social and racial issues in this country. He was talking about Rasheed Wallace. Now, of course, Rasheed Wallace played in the NBA for, I want to say 95 to about 2010. I think he briefly came back with the Knicks. So let's just go 16 years. I think he played about 16 years in the league, and he had a very successful career. And, you know, if this had been like 20, 25 years ago, I would say that Rasheed Wallace is not a Hall of Famer, though he had a really good career. NBA championship earlier in his career, especially with Portland. He was an all-star, volatile individual, but not a Hall of Famer. But with the way that the bar has been lowered, hell, I guess you can make a case for him. But that's just to be in the Hall of Fame. Dr. Umar Johnson, however, believes that Rasheed Wallace deserves even more loftier praise from NBA fans and basketball fans. Matter of fact, he believes that Rasheed Wallace is arguably the greatest power forward of all time.
Outside of GOAT status, Rasheed Wallace, arguably the second greatest power forward to ever play the game. He was better than Barkley, just as good as, if not better than Garnett. Maybe a step behind Tim Duncan, but I'm not even sure about that. I believe Rasheed Wallace may have been the greatest power forward of all time. He was putting up Shaq numbers against Shaq, unguardable, one of the only power forwards with a three. Look at Rasheed Wallace's game. He had no weaknesses. But Rasheed Wallace, like Allen Iverson, they were not company men. They don't dance to nobody's tune but their own.
Okay. I will say this about Rasheed Wallace. For those of you who are younger, I know one of the first things that you tend to do is you look up stats and resume. Now, the thing about that is Rasheed Wallace was almost to a fault, and maybe was to a fault at times, unselfish. He didn't care about stats. He didn't go out there with the mind frame of, oh, I got to get 20 and 10. Or I need to put up my numbers to maintain this perception I'm this all-star level player on the hierarchy. I got to go out there and stat pad. Even if I'm having a bad night, I got to go out there and force the issue, in the waning moments of the game, so I make sure I hit my averages. He wasn't that type of guy. He wasn't. Only thing Rasheed Wallace wanted to do was win. And so his stats, don't necessarily reflect how great a player he was in his absolute prime. To me, I think his best years as an athlete and as a performer and as a player were probably his Portland years, although he didn't always win with Portland. He had his greatest success with the Pistons, but his best years, I thought, were with the Portland Trailblazers. Matter of fact, he had some seasons where he was putting them like 19 and 7, 20 and 8, maybe something like that. But he wasn't a very selfish player. When it comes to awards, well, sometimes these awards, they're subjective, like meaning that there are certain politics at play when their NBA is choosing to give all NBA selections, all-star selections, if they're not promoting or pushing a player, and he's going to be at a disadvantage. And one of the things that I think that Rasheed suffered from in his best years was he played with Portland. Portland, I always remember in the late 90s, early 2000s, they were called the Portland Jailblazers. Why? Because a lot of these guys, for some reason, ran afoul of the law. Not necessarily they were criminals, although the media tried to portray them as that, but usually it was the run of the mill, weed possession or things of that nature. Or maybe the occasional domestic issue. Well, I'm not condoning that, but I'm just saying the occasional domestic issue, et cetera, right? Arrested on gun charges, whatever. Um, I can't help but also believe that Dr. Umar Johnson looks favorably upon Rasheed Wallace because he was perceived as being against the system, i.e., the NBA. Remember, this is the same guy, Rasheed Wallace, that referred to the NBA as a plantation and players as slaves. Um, this is the same Rasheed Wallace that was always getting into it with officials. He holds the record for most technicals in the season with 41, which I doubt anybody's ever going to break. He has the record, I believe, for most technicals all time. He was the ultimate against the system player, you know what I'm saying? And was very vocal about it. And Rasheed is this guy that he is extremely outspoken to the point where that has helped or hurt him, I should say. It has hurt him when, as far as being in the NBA fraternity post playing career as a coach or an assistant, it's hurt him. Matter of fact, when I understand, is one of the things that hurt him for getting that job back when it was announced he was going to be on Darvin Ham's staff. His outspokenness was one of the reasons why he was ultimately not chosen to be on the staff. And Rasheed's always been that guy. So I can understand Dr. Umar Johnson being how he operates and how his mind works. He's going to champion those types of guys. And players who are perceived as company men, or as he would put it, buck dancers, he's not going to put them on that same trajectory or that same level. Now, these are my thoughts. I think what Dr. Rasheed, I think what Dr. Umar Johnson is saying about Rasheed, I think he means this. I think he's talking about from a skill set standpoint. I think that's what he's talking about. Now, I don't disagree with a lot of what he's saying. There's one thing I do disagree with him about, saying that Rasheed didn't have any weaknesses. I never thought Rasheed was the strongest rebounder. I didn't think he was a great offensive rebounder, a great rebounder in general, compared to other power forwards. But other than that, I understand what he means from, if you're talking about from a skill set standpoint, Rasheed Wallace was up there. Like, he was a great defensive player. He had that unstoppable turnaround jumper in the post. He was a beast in the post as far as scoring. He just wasn't a selfish guy who went out there and with the intent on trying to put up 25, 30 points a night. He had to be encouraged to take more shots. Um, you know what I'm saying? When he was younger, he was a terror in the open court, catching alley oops and dunks and things of that nature. He could be effective, obviously scoring traditionally in the post. Like I said, in the half court situation, he was just as dangerous there. He had the mid range jumper. He was one of the first bigs to actually have a 3-point shot back when the 3-point shot wasn't something that you wanted to see or you necessarily saw often in a big man. He was 6'10". Rasheed, I guess in shoes at least, listed 6'10". 6'10", 235 pounds. He was drafted. He was a lot lighter when he was drafted out of UNC. As he progressed, he got bigger. Toward the end of his career, he's probably around 265. Uh, but he just naturally got bigger. Yeah, when you talk about abilities, yeah, Rasheed was great. But if you're talking about accomplishments, resume, um, dominance, winning, no, he's not in that conversation. No, and I totally disagree with him being better than Barkley. Barkley was just Barkley was just way more dominant, man. Barkley was a more dominant rebounder. Now Rasheed was a better defender, but Barkley was a much better playmaker. Barkley was a better rebounder. Barkley was just more dominant. Barkley carried a team on his back, willing to do that, and Barkley was actually winning. Uh, Barkley was actually, what I'm saying, carrying a very weak Sixers team to the playoffs. Whereas Rasheed Wallace, I can't sit up there and say that those Portland Trailblazer teams were not stacked. They were pretty damn stacked in the late '90s, early 2000s. Those teams were pretty damn stacked. I mean, I want to say what one year they had what Rasheed. Let me look some up right quick. The year that they played the Lakers in the conference finals, you had Rasheed on that team. You had Scottie Pippen. I guess Scottie wasn't the same guy that he was before, right? I want to say that team had Damon Stoudemire, didn't it? I know he was there in '99, I think. Let's check this roster out. So that team had Greg Anthony, Stacey Augmon, Brian Grant, Gary Grant, Jermaine O'Neal, a young Jermaine O'Neal though, Scottie Pippen, Arvydas Sabonis, Detlef Shrimp, Steve Smith, Damon Stoudemire, Bonzi Wells, and Rasheed Wallace. And they lost to the Lakers. As great as Shaq and Kobe were, I can make an argument this Portland Trailblazers team, man to man, was more stacked than the Lakers. They choked in Game 7. They should have won Game 7. You don't go into the fourth quarter with a 15-point lead in that era and lose. You just don't do it. There's no way in hell Tim Duncan, Charles Barkley, Kevin Durant, Kevin Garnett, Kevin McHale, any of those guys. Bob Pettit, yeah, I'm dragging out Bob Pettit. I don't see those guys letting their team blow a 15-point lead in the fourth going into the fourth quarter. Nah, I don't see it. I'm sorry, I just don't see it. I'm sorry, I don't see it. Now Rasheed Wallace is underrated, but he ain't top. Hell, I would if I had to take a stab at it, I would say Rasheed Wallace is like top 200 all time. Top 200, top 175, maybe. Somewhere in that range. Top 200, maybe. Yeah, that's about right. Top 200. But nah, man. The greatest power forward or behind Tim Duncan or arguably better than Tim Duncan. Nah, now you going, yeah. Stick to what you know, bro. Stick to social issues, racial issues. In that area, you are a genius. But when it comes to this, that was nah. Now, like I said, if he was saying that Rasheed Wallace is grossly underrated, I would agree with that. Absolutely. If he were to say Rasheed Wallace is one of the most talented power forwards of all time, absolutely. But so is Derek Coleman. Derek Coleman, Charles Barkley himself said that. Derek Coleman was arguably one of the greatest power forwards ever from a talent perspective. But he never put it all together because Derek Coleman didn't work hard enough. And, Derek Coleman was kind of lazy and couldn't keep his head out of the refrigerator. I mean, it is what it is. But anyway, that's just my take on something you guys think.
Core real.